What's going on? It's Kevin Kenny, and welcome to a brand new, very lively edition of the Build series here. We've got some OG SoCal skate punks, and I hope they don't mind me saying that in the house. They've been making music for over 25 years and just recently put out their first ever acoustic album called Hold Fast. Please let's give a warm welcome to Face to Face.
What's up?
Gentlemen, how are we?
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm stoked. I was just geeking out, fanboying a little bit before we went live here, telling you how big of a fan I am. But you are here for good reason. Not only are you going to pay us, a visit, perform, but you also got a show tomorrow night, City Winery, right here in Manhattan. How does it feel being back in New York?
It's always great to be back in New York, even though we started on the West Coast and we're a SoCal band. We're one of the few bands that was in punk rock able to almost immediately connect with a New York audience, and I think that's because real early in our career we played shows in New York, and we made sure we got over here early in our career and kind of established a foothold, planted a flag. So it's always like a, it's just as strong as Los Angeles is for us.
Yeah. Do you remember your first time playing in New York?
What was it? What was that place called? Circus something or other?
Well, we played CBGB's before it closed.
Crazy.
We're actually that old.
Yeah.
That was one of our first shows, if maybe not our first. I think the first time was maybe with No Effects.
Trevor remembers
on that
every
tour.
club and every promoter and every day.
You really? Are you like the memory
Well,
guy?
now you're putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
Now I won't
Yeah.
remember them all. But there used to be a venue called Tramps that we played quite a bit in the early days here. That was our stomping grounds. That was like the spot.
You know, it's funny, like bands today, they can't really appreciate what it was like back then because you put up a song online, it's immediately globally available, right? Globally distributed. But you really had to go out and, like you were saying, plant your flag in various cities. Was it instant in New York? I know you just alluded to, like, eventually they came around, but it must have been scary kind of crossing the country because you were popular in SoCal. And then here's a totally different audience.
We're, even though we've been doing it for a long time, we're third or fourth even wave of punk rock, I guess, starting out in '91. And New York, at the time, still notorious for like that heavy hardcore scene. So being more of a pop-oriented band, but with faster songs and heavier beats and whatnot, we were wondering if we could kind of toe that line. And, the scene here welcomed us early on, which we were we felt really lucky for that. And so,
Jersey must have loved you guys.
Yeah.
I'm from New Jersey, and just like I feel like that is almost like, aside from SoCal, for your guys' music, that's definitely a capital when you're talking just United States of punk, if you will. Whose idea was the acoustic album?
Actually, I don't know if any one of us came up with it, but it was something that kind of came up while we were on tour together because we were doing a tour, and we were kind of late to the game of doing these VIP tickets, which, after the recording industry kind of fell and went away, and we're all doing everything online now for decades, bands started doing these VIP tickets, and we just never thought about doing it. It just felt weird to us, but we implemented it, I guess it was a couple of years ago when we tried it. And as part of the package, we wanted to give a little bit more. So we're like, well, why don't we just grab some acoustic guitars and play some music there too? And through the course of doing that for a week or so on the tour, we were kind of like, have you guys noticed how like this is taking on a bit of a life of its own? And these songs, in this way, kind of, they feel different, and they're able to breathe in a whole new way, and it's connecting with people in a way that was unique and organic. And so we just jumped into the studio while we were on tour and recorded a bunch of them, not really knowing what we would do with it. And then later, after we sat with it for a while and listened to it, and we played it for our manager and people we work with and whatnot, and everybody was like, you should go back in the studio and like really give that a try and actually explore it more and not approach it just mainly, so slipshod like we did. So
Yeah.
The original recordings were pretty raw. There was next to no percussion, and I didn't do any bass since I was playing acoustic guitar for those VIP shows. And then it was just decided, this is a terrific thing that, you should do it for real. And so we added real drums or, the kit. and I put bass on it now, so it's a more fleshed out version. So
Oh, for sure.
It really was spontaneous and organic. It wasn't like a set out goal. It just grew from one stage to the next until we have this record.
Yeah, now it seems really official when we're looking at a giant blow up of the.
Yeah.
But it all came about incrementally, you know, step by step, and so now here we are, touring it, because once we went through the steps and took it to this point, it's something that we really enjoyed doing so much that we're like, dude, we should totally go on tour and play this, and it's so much fun to play the songs live in this way and see people have a completely different emotional reaction to it. You know, after playing them punk rock and having people circle pit and that whole vibe, which is amazing, and its own energy. This is a completely different energy, so it's really cool to see that too.
We said, let's take it to New York and see if we get our asses kicked.
Yeah, there you go. We're gonna find out tomorrow night, man.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
We'll be sipping wine.
Yeah, exactly.
We're trying to be refined in our old age, I guess. I don't
Just
know.
moshing, but very slowly with the wine, making sure nothing spills.
Trying not to spill.
Yeah, exactly. What's cool about this record, and it makes me think of a conversation we had with a man named John Batiste here. He's the band leader for Stephen Colbert. He's got a new album coming out, whatever. We were talking last week about songs and how songs have lives like we have lives, and you get to know a song in different ways as you get older. You revisit material, and that's made me think of this record, and specifically the song Disconnected. Which is one of my favorite songs, and I want to actually highlight a passage and ask you a question about it. Reading some of the lyrics from Disconnected, it says, it's like a quiz. Why do bands get so nervous when I read their lyrics, like we're gonna quiz you on something? No, but it just says here, and I'm sure you know this very well, it says, you don't know what you want, it may take you years to find out, you don't know what you need, it's something that may never come to you. So you wrote that, of course, like 91, 92, probably for that first record.
Yes.
And now you're singing it on this record, obviously a lot more years in the business, a lot more years just in life.
Right.
What were you writing about, excuse me, what were you writing about when you wrote that in 91, 92? And then when you sing it now, what do you think about?
It's still relevant in much the same way that it was when I wrote it. I was in my early 20s when I wrote the song, and I was writing about, you know, being at that age, you know, what it's like to be in your late teens, early 20s, and you're still sort of trying to discover yourself, and that passage is specifically about that, about, like, you know, being young and not really growing into what it's going to be, what your life may ultimately be, or what you want for your life, but the song as a whole is more about being disconnected from the reality of what's going on around you, and kind of just stumbling through your 20s and making lots of mistakes and maybe not taking life very seriously. And actually, I used to be super, super serious when I was that age. So it was almost like cautionary to my other 20-somethings at that age. And so now that I'm almost 50, it's still about just what it's like to go through life at that age, and feeling like you know so much and you kind of have it figured out, but you couldn't imagine what's coming 20 years later.
Yeah, it's impossible. I mean, there's a little maybe impatience there of like wanting to figure it all out. Do you feel like maybe that's one of the biggest differences between face-to-face then and face-to-face now, is that patience that just comes with age and experience?
We've always been hungry for the next thing, you know, whatever we're working on, and we still feel as vital creatively and musically as we ever did. And it's interesting because every stage of your life that you're going through, you're almost intellectually 10 years behind yourself, you know. I just got used to my 20s when I was in my 30s, and my 30s when I was in my 40s. So you're always kind of playing catch up. And I think that goes back to that line, you don't know, you know, it may take you years to find out. And it doesn't end just, you know, when you hit these plateaus in life. You're always...
Yeah, that's a good point. And I guess that's the way that maybe that lyric is relevant no matter what age you are, is a lot of times you might think you know what's good for you, and then if you get it, you realize that that wasn't the thing.
Yeah.
You thought it was something that you wanted, but it wasn't what you needed.
Yeah.
You know?
When you finally give your 20-something-year-old self what you thought he wanted, but you no longer...
You need something else
like
now.
the house,
30.
that house you wanted, or the marriage, or... I don't know, a sports
Right.
car, if you're...
Did you guys ever figure it out?
Still searching.
No, there's no figuring any of this stuff out.
Hell yeah.
No, there's just your best measured guess.
Yeah.
And I mean, I I think ultimately it's just about trying to be a good human and being good to other people and try to keep the ugliness down.
Definitely. I got to geek out a little bit, tell a super old story, or have you tell it, I should say, about Disconnected, because I think I can't think of another example of a band that was in this position, but that's off your first record, right? 92, right? So that's off your first record. And of course, so your diehard fans know that as like one of the songs, maybe even a single off the first record. And then you're about to put out the record in 95. And that's kind of when like the masses start catching on to it. Radio starts picking it up a little bit. And you're faced with this dilemma like, wait, like, so this is like a 3-year-old song, but like, it's kind of hot right now. Yeah. We got to put it on this one too. So that song, Disconnected, actually appears on 2 different records and was pushed on 2 different albums. Can you tell that story?
Well, I think now that we've released it on this acoustic record, it's been on more like 6 albums.
4 that I can count, yeah.
That was purely a product of 2 different things. And I used this metaphor the other day when we were talking about what it's like to be in a band for a long period of time like we have. And I said, I feel like through my entire career, I've had a dull machete, and I've been hacking through this dense jungle, only maybe being able to see about 6 inches ahead of me at a time. And so very true to that metaphor, we made the record. We went from one record label to another record label, and they said, oh, you should put out an EP because we want a chance to run it through our system. And Disconnected was on the EP with some of the other stuff. It was an alternate version. And then the EP actually started getting airplay because some other section of the record label, this is back in the days when there were major labels for punk bands, not just top 40 acts. And, so that got on the radio, and then we were about ready to release our full-length album, and they said, oh, you have to strip it onto the full length. And in the 90s, there was this real concern with people trying to be considered punk, like a punk rock ethic.
Right.
So that's why that whole speech is on there. It was an effort for us to try to diffuse it. And we brought the record label head in and said, we want to do this skit with you, otherwise we won't put it on the record.
Yeah.
So it was all kind of tongue-in-cheek.
It's funny how the sensibilities have changed, right? Like just like the fear of selling out.
Oh, yeah.
Or like it doesn't exist anymore.
That's how it goes away, too. Like people they either like your band or they don't like your band. There's no judgment about selling out or this or that. But I think mainly that went away with the major labels.
Yeah.
That allowed a lot. They went away and that judgment went away.
It's interesting to me because selling out always meant going against your own personal tastes and preferences to have success. And I know a lot of people do this just to work in the business, but I never felt we did that. But everyone has their own benchmark for what they consider that thing. And I never honestly considered it an issue.
Yeah.
Because they don't know me and they can only judge from their vantage point. Like if you sign to a major label, you're selling out, but that isn't necessarily true. If just sticking true to your musical ethics is your personal benchmark for what is or isn't selling out.
Yeah.
And I never felt that we did that,
No.
So.
And it's, 9 times out of 10, it's some bitter guy from back in the
Right.
local scene who's just like hears you on the radio and hates it. You know what I mean?
Well,
That's
they hate
typically
you
what's
to
happening.
succeed.
It's an easy thing to fling at someone. Oh, you're
Exactly.
a sellout,
I got to ask you
Hard to
about
back.
Blind, because I love, of course, your version of Blind, the original one, a super heavy song from back in the day. And then Rise Against, of course, came around maybe 5 years ago with a great acoustic-driven song version of it. They covered Blind. And then I heard a little bit of the Rise Against version when I was listening to you guys. Of course, you're working with the same instruments. It'll sound similar. But I'm wondering, did that version influence this approach at all? Like, did you hear anything in the Rise Against version? You go, maybe we take that and put it in this one.
Yes, actually, one little tiny piece. We did, what that actually was is we did a split side 7-inch with Rise Against. And
Really?
we covered one of their songs and they covered one of ours.
Okay.
So the way that Tim sang Blind, one of the lines near the end of the song where he kind of did like this cool vocal ad-lib, I kind of took that. And I use it live now.
Yeah.
But I didn't record that version into the acoustic version.
Right. But you guys have linked up, I've seen you guys perform that live with Tim. And
Yeah.
it's always
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That was, if we ever get a chance, like if we're on a festival or a radio show or something together,
Oh, yeah.
I'll always go over and bug them. Like, hey, dude,
dude.
you want to come up and sing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they're great people. We like those guys a lot. They're
I was talking to Kevin Lyman recently just about the end of Warped and, just the history of that tour. You guys were on the first ever tour, right? 95?
We were.
Yeah.
The first ever Warped Tour.
Could you just are there any stories? I'm such a Warped kid. Are there any stories from that first one? I know Sublime was out with you guys, no doubt. I think L7 was there.
So that one, we were actually on our own headline tour. and our manager called us and said, hey, this thing called the Warped Tour is playing some of the same cities you guys are. You should probably jump on it. Don't try to play against it or whatever. And we're like, we don't want to be, what's the Warped Tour?
Right.
And he's like, nah, just do it. And we were on only, I think, 3 shows maybe.
Okay.
And the first year of the Warped Tour was amazing because there was a stage, and then directly in front of us was this gigantic half pipe. Like
Right,
they brought
'cause
out
Warp
a
was a magazine.
huge half pipe.
Yeah.
And like Steve Caballero was out there, and all these great skaters were out there, and the exchange of like when the band played and then you watch the skaters go, oh, I love this song, and they would drop in and you'd see them getting like crazy air. We felt like there was this exchange, like the harder we played and the more we were into it, the harder they went. And it was almost like the audience was irrelevant. We were like, you know, going back and forth with the action sports guys and us. And so it was a really, really cool thing. And we were excited about it in the beginning. And then, of course, it was wildly successful and just kind of morphed and changed with the times and the audiences and whatnot. But I loved what the actual early true spirit of Warped Tour was. It just fit perfectly with the music and the time. And
Oh, yeah. I'm glad you told that story because Warp doesn't get the credit, I think, in terms of how pioneering it was to pair culture, like skate culture, with music. You know what I mean? It really was an immersive experience those early years, for sure. We've got this great audience, and I'd love to get to their questions. First one's going to come from right up front.
What's the tour for spring? More recording, touring, writing new songs?
plan for spring right now, I think we're looking at doing another leg of the Hold Fast tour, more of the acoustic tour and promoting that. And hopefully we'll be able to get into the studio and work on recording some new songs. There's some talk about maybe either cutting a new punk rock album, maybe a second acoustic album, or maybe just recording songs and releasing them as singles here and there. We're kind of still figuring out like what the next move is, but we're going to be doing a lot of touring and shows for this
We
record.
honestly started writing the next punk rock record before we did this, and this kind of caught us by surprise. I mean, I'm not kidding when I say this was totally spontaneous, one step to another, and it sort of snuck in on our plans as they were lying at the time, and now we're just running with it. There's no real time frame on anything, so, but we actually had, started working on the new material, yeah.
Isn't it funny, like so full circle, right? Like you start in the early 90s, DIY, just like making it up as you go. And then here you guys are like 20 years later, 25 years later, just doing the same thing. It's so cool.
You kind of have to go with the flow, you know?
Yeah.
Like you can make plans, but it's better to like go where the easy things are rather than to try and fight it.
Yeah, the natural things, organic things. We'll take a final question from over here.
Hi. So this is actually going to be an online question. Let me just bring it up. So Jacob wants to know, who would be your dream collaboration, either performing or songwriting?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm terrible at these. Scott, you want to run with this?
It's all you, buddy.
I don't know, dream. I mean, I'm really terrible at ultimatum questions where it's like, pick one guy that you'd like to do this or that with. There's several people that I think would be fantastic to work with. Because we're doing acoustic music, we're just starting to get into this world now where we're looking at different types of artists to pair up with on the road. So we've done some dates with Corey Brannon, who's fantastic. We're out with Austin Lucas right now, who's awesome. We had the opportunity to play with Lucero and Frank Turner recently, and I mean, I'd love to work with any of those dudes on a songwriting. I think it'd be great to write music with them. It never worked out to have Corey come up and play with us when we were out there, but we'll try and get Austin to come up and play some music with us on this tour. Maybe tomorrow night. That'd be fun.
Oh, that'd
City
be rad.
Winery. So, I mean, yeah, any of those kind of guys that are sort of doing singer-songwriter thing right now, it'd be fun to pair up with them and see how, the music that we've created and kind of reinterpreted as this could sort of mash up with what they're doing.
Yeah. Were there any like collabs that almost happened back in the day?
Well, Paul McCartney wanted to work with us, but we were like, no way, man.
No way.
I think you were washing your hair that week or something. Not available.
But nobody in the scene that you were just like around these bands, you'd talk after a tour or show, and it's like, we just.
Not off the top of my head. I mean, we've done split side 7 inches with Dropkick Murphys, and we did the split side with Rise Against, and we're buddies with, you know, a bunch of different bands and stuff out there, but we just, I don't know, for some reason we don't
My
do
idols are
collabs that
older, and
much.
most of them are dead. You know? I would want to work with Joe Strummer. I'd want to write with Joe Strummer or
Get the
Paul
hologram,
Weller.
yeah.
He's still working, and he's amazing. You know, that
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Elvis and Johnny Cash.
Right,
I mean,
right.
there's the greats, of course.
Of
That,
course.
um,
Maybe for the spring album, you know? An Elvis feature.
yeah, we'll do covers.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there you go, guys. We're unfortunately out of time, or maybe I should say fortunately, because you're going to get to what you do best over there. Again, the record is out, the acoustic album, Hold Fast. They are face to face, and thank you very much for watching at home.